I just shared with you the different areas on the screen, so now let's take a little deeper look at some of the tabs and buttons and subsections of each of those areas. So here on the left, we have the library area. As you can see, we have a library here. We have a smart collection, and this is a great way of looking at different things that Final Cut has automatically grouped up for you. It's going to show you all the video in a library, just the audio clips in library, maybe a clip that you've marked as favorite. It's going to show you all the projects that you have in a specific library and any still images that you have. You can even add a smart collection by saying new smart collection. I just right-clicked to create that there. And you can just say new smart collection or whatever it's going to be about, right? And then if you double-click on the gear here, you can give it some filters of things to look for. You can search for just specific text, or you could search for a specific media type. It's only video with audio or just the audio. You can do all kinds of combinations to create your own smart collection. I'm just going to delete that by hitting Command Delete. And here we have an event itself. An event is where you can work on a subset of projects or files. We'll get into that a little bit later. But you can see here it's got its own sort of smart collection folder of things that it deems as a medium shot or a one-person shot. You probably won't use that a whole lot, but there it is in case you wanted to use it. Here again in the library is what I call the Media tab. You can access iTunes through it, and here I'm already accessing a playlist that I created called Epidemic Sound. That's where I've got most of my music. Or if you just click on the Music tab, you can see all the music that is in your entire iTunes library. This is a new setup, so this is all the music that I have in my library. Now, if you go to the sound effects button here, you can see lots of different sound effects that come with Final Cut itself. Oh, what was that? Barking dogs. And you can search for a couple different stuff. Let's listen for a glass breaking sound. Oh, they have body fall through glass. That is, wow, that's a body falling through glass. You can also break down the effects subsection into specific sounds or subsets of sounds. This is just the basic folders that Final Cut has built in. You can go for just machine sounds if you want to browse and not like search for a specific thing. So now we're in the machine subsection, and it's showing us all the sounds that it thinks relate to machinery. Morse code, some hydraulics. Or we can go to sci-fi sounds. And all kinds of interesting stuff in here. So there you have it, a couple different areas that you can get to in the sound effects tab. I typically only access iTunes. Occasionally I'll get a sound effect if I want to enhance something. Usually for a travel video, I'm not doing a lot of sound effects though. Lastly, in the libraries area, we have the titles and generators button, or tab, I suppose. If you go into the titles, you can see there's a lot of different titles here. You can just browse for specific ones. Perhaps you know the name of it. Let's do typewriter. Okay, so I know that typewriter is a specific one. If I just click and drag this down here into a project, it's going to ask me to create a project. I'll just say OK for the purposes of this demonstration. And you can see, hitting space, it's going to typewriter out a title. We'll get into how to use titles a little bit again later, but you can see there like a lot of different options for different titles that you can add. This one looks pretty cool as well. I just mouse over it. It's a very cool Hollywood-style title effect that you could maybe put in the beginning of a video if you want to be really cool. So under the generators, you can hit that little drop-down caret and see some different subsections. You can do the same with the titles. See different subsections that it has. You can have background generators. This is just stuff that it thinks is good for in the background of something. Maybe you would want to put that generator down and then add a title. Let's do this little guy right on top of it. So you can see I'm already showing you some editing stuff, and I'm not even trying here. We have a generated background with a title over it. Pretty cool. And again, if you want, you can search through the generators. And I don't know, is green anything? I don't even know what the generators would be. But if you perhaps wanted to find something really quickly and you already knew what it was, you can just find it. Okay, now we're done here with the library section. Let's go over and look at the viewing area. As you probably already saw before, when you mouse over something, it's going to show you that thing in the viewer area. If I hit spacebar, while I'm editing the project, I should say, it's going to play that project and you're going to see it up here in the viewer. You can resize these things to make them bigger or smaller. And if you look up here in the top right where it says 78%, and you click on it, it says fit. That means that no matter what size I resize this to, it's going to fit the video to fill that area. On the other hand, if I select a different size, like 25%, you can see it's only going to fill up 25% of the area on the screen. I usually keep it to fit because that just makes sense. If you go to the View tab here, you can see that there's several different things that you can toggle on and off for the viewer. Most of the stuff you're not going to use all the time. You may occasionally use it, and I will get into it later in some of the more advanced sections, but just suffice it to say you can show video scopes, you can show different angles, and if you're working with 360-degree footage, you can view it there. In addition to that, you can change the quality of the footage being shown in the viewer. I'll get into this a little bit later, but this is a great area if you have an older computer to help improve some performance. You can view different color channels. Video is made up of 3 channels generally, red, green, and blue, and you could view each channel separately. You probably are never going to need to do that, but you never know. Got a couple different areas here. I rarely touch any of that. The only one I usually touch here is the video scopes, which we'll get into a bit later. In the viewing area itself, just below the viewing area, you have here the time code section. When you are mousing over an area, you can see that it's showing you where you are in your timeline. Here I'm at 1 minute, 41 seconds, and 1 frame. Depending on the type of project that you're working with, you're going to have 24 frames in a second, or 30 frames in a second, or 60 frames in a second. And this will change automatically accordingly. And just below it here, we're going to skip ahead to the workspace area just for a second. You can see it's going to show you the total time. And right now that's 0 because I don't have anything in the project. But let's say I added a generator to this project. You can see that the total length of the project now is 1 minute and 40 seconds. If I scroll around, you can see I'm now at the 1 minute mark approximately in a few frames. All right, so now while we're still in the workspace area, let's look at the index. If you click here on the index, it's going to give you a list of all the files in your project. Let's add a curtain. I hit a little hotkey there, but we're going to talk about it a little later. So now you can see I've got the clouds generator as well as the curtain generator. If I wanted, I could search and just show me all the files that start with A or contain the letter A, right? And curtain only contains A. But if I search for things that start with C, it's clouds and curtain. Let's add a few other clips into the timeline here. I just double-clicked it and it added it. And now you can see we've got, if I search for any clip that has the letter A in it, it's got 2 instances of gradient and 1 of curtain. This is great if you want to select several items in a row. You click on that, hold down Command, click on that one, and hold down Command and click on that one. You can see this is not selected, but gradient, and curtain are selected here in our timeline, as well as here in the index. It's a really fantastic way for just bumping around and showing you a broad overview of all the files that are in your timeline. It's really, really convenient. Here we have different ways of inserting footage. So let's say I have curtain selected up here as a generator. This works for clips as well. You can change the way something is inserted. So if you hover over this, it says connect the selected clips to the primary storyline. So if I click on that, it's just going to pop it right there onto the primary storyline. The primary storyline is the main line of all the clips that you have, and anything above or below it is a secondary or tertiary timeline. Everything is connected to that. You see that little blue line? It's all connected here to the primary timeline. And I'm just clicking and dragging this around. Feel free to just play with it. You can't really break anything too much unless you've, just deleted your footage. Don't do that. And we also have here different mice modes that you can use. You can use the select mouse, which is just the normal mouse. And here, if we hit the trim mouse, it gives a different cursor. If you hit the position mouse, it's going to give you another cursor still. Position mouse lets you set an absolute position of something so that it's not necessarily connected to the primary storyline. You see how it's creating that black fill in the middle? Whereas, if I was using just the normal mouse, I hit A there as a shortcut to get back to the normal mouse. And let's delete this just blank footage. If I click and drag that around, you can see it's not actually creating any generator in the background because it's letting me just move the footage around as opposed to creating an exact position for it. See that? Just darkness there and then the curtain effect. We also have the range selection. If you click on that, it allows you to select a range. If you go to the blade tool, it lets you just click and cut something as in a blade would. Cut that. And if you use the zoom tool, you can zoom in on a specific area. Maybe you want to get in really close to that. Another quick way of zooming in is by holding down Command and hitting plus to zoom in, or minus to zoom out. If you use the hand tool, you can just drag around the timeline, and it doesn't actually grab anything specific, it just lets you move this. Although if you're using a trackpad, this is quite simple. You just use 2 fingers on the keyboard, and to demonstrate that, I'm just going to go back to the normal mouse. You just use 2 fingers on the keyboard and drag your fingers left and right. So you aren't going to be using all these different mice all the time, but it's good to know that they exist. Now, while we're still here in the workspace area, I'm going to show you a couple different areas on the screen that you're going to need to know. This button right here turns snapping on and off. With snapping on, you drag it to something, it's going to snap right next to something. With snapping off, and you drag something around, it's not going to snap at all. It's just gonna bump into stuff. Good to know in case you were editing and something feels off. You have the solo headphones button, which you're probably not really going to use much at all, but you can select to listen to just one thing, see how everything else is grayed out. So we're going to turn that back off. And if you click this button here, it turns audio skimming on and off. So with it on, let's just add a little audio file real quick. With the audio skimming on, as you move the mouse around in the timeline, it gives you a preview of what's in the timeline. So let's move our mouse. You can see it's not actually playing in time because I'm moving my mouse faster than the timeline is actually going to play. So, right? Now, if you go ahead and turn that off and you move your mouse around, it's not going to play the sounds as you move your mouse around. The button next to it turns video and audio skimming on and off together. So if I turn that off and I move my mouse around, it's not going to show me any of the video or play any of the audio. And lastly, for the workspace area, we have the effects pane. If you click on this, it's going to turn or open up your effects pane. You can see there's a couple different subsections here. You have video with all video effects, only video effects that apply to 360, or basic effects that come in it. If we just go to the all section, you can see here there's a lot of different effects. You can just apply a 50s TV look to something. So if I just plop that onto a generator, it turns the generator into an old 50s style show. We can also age it if we wanted to. It also makes it look pretty old. We can also just keep piling on effects. We can make it look like an alien lab. But there's also useful ones too, not just special looks. You can add advanced stuff like a mask, which is going to block out an area on the screen depending on what you've selected. So let's just quickly show you that. I'm going to go here to the mask effect, and I'm just going to draw a quick mask, and you can see it, got rid of everything except for the area that I selected. We'll get into all this later, but I just want to give you guys a quick overview of the section. You can see here I'm turning effects off. And that's a great segue here into our inspector pane. With the inspector pane, you can inspect an item that you're talking about. Oh, just real quickly, right next to the effects is the transitions pane. So if you wanted to add a transition to something, let's just add the cross dissolve to this clip. And you can see now that it's going to fade in. And it automatically added to the out as well. All right. So now back up here into the inspector pane, if we have something selected like that, it's going to give us information about that item. If it's just an audio clip, it's only going to give you the information about the audio and information about the file itself. If we click here on the audio tab, you can just change the overall volume of something. You see how it's changing it both in the timeline as well as in the inspector. It's giving you a live feedback on what you're changing as well as the value associated with it. You can also just type in a value. 16 decibels, well, it maxes out at 12, so that makes sense. Or you can drop the volume down real low. You can also do a few audio enhancements. You can pan the sound left or right if you're into that sort of thing. And let's inspect this generator here. When you're inspecting a generator or a title, it gives you additional parameters for that thing. So here you can see it's giving us the option to color the curtains red. Wow, I had an effect applied that gives it a 50s TV look, so let's turn that off. If we go back here, you can see that we can change the color of the curtains, right? Lots of different generators have different effects. And you can change the opacity. That's basically how see-through something is. All right, we royally messed that up and made it look ugly, so let's make it red again. There you go. Looks like some curtains again. And here on the video tab, you get specific parameters associated with the video. I'm going to hide the effects tab here just so it compacts it a little bit for us. We can change the blend mode of something. This is an advanced effect that you probably aren't going to need to use. You can change the opacity of the video clip itself from here as well. You can transform something, and that basically means the size and position of something. So you can change how big or small something is by scaling it. Or you can crop something, which basically cuts off the edge of something, right? You're cropping it like that. You can distort something if you needed to, I suppose. There we go. I'm just using my trackpad to scroll up and down in this specific parameter of the item, the bottom left corner of that thing. And so there's a bunch of different options, and that changes depending on what clip or generator or file even that you have selected. If we go here to this next tab, this is the color board. Here you can change the color of something, right? So if you move these around, this affects the color of something as well as the saturation. That's how intense the color is. It's not doing a whole lot to this clip because it's a generator clip, but you can also change the exposure of something. That's essentially how bright something is. We'll get into all this a bit later, but I just want to give you a quick breakdown here. And in the inspector button of the inspector panel, we have all the specific parameters of the file itself. You can see when it starts, when it stops, and how long something is. So if I change the length of this, let's make this a little easier. Let's just use this clip. If I change the length of this, you can see that the start and end point as well as the duration changes with it. So, boop, made it smaller. Now the duration, start, and end point are different. As well as it tells you what events it's in, what specific location in the program it's at. In this case, it's in our untitled library. And it has different versions of the media file available, the original file, and an optimized version of the file. And that's something that we'll get into a little bit later. But these are the basic buttons and tabs areas on the screen of the different workspaces that you'll be working in.